And joining us now on the Night Shift podcast live from NYU. We're in a conference building in the John A. Paulson Center, which is where her office is located in the Big Apple. I am with Kim Wyant, who UCF fans will know as one of the OG goalkeepers of UCF soccer. Played for the Knights from 1982 to 1985 as part of that 1982 NCAA championship game. But of course, many non-UCF fans will know her from her time with the U.S. women's national team. Currently, she is the head coach of the NYU men's soccer team, currently the only woman coaching a men's soccer team in the NCAA. Coach Wyant, thank you so much for bringing me, letting me into your, I guess this isn't your office, but it's a conference room in the building where your office is. So I really appreciate you talking with us today.
It's my pleasure. It was great to hear that introduction.
So I guess I'll go ahead and let's just start back at the beginning. Early 80s, UCF women's soccer, before you came around, had only been around for 1 year, and it was in the AIAW. So the very first year you started, the NCAA had just taken on women's soccer as a sport. So how did you end up finding this pretty much relatively nascent UCF women's soccer program at the time?
Like a lot of stuff in my career, it kind of happened by accident. I was a kid growing up in Miami. I was a good athlete. I was playing a lot of different sports. But I got recruited onto this soccer team, so I started playing soccer in high school. Turns out I was pretty good as the goalkeeper. And I really wasn't thinking about playing a sport in college. I wasn't maybe even thinking about going to college. But these opportunities started to happen for me. I started to get recruited to play soccer in college, and luckily Central Florida was an early participant in the sport. Jim Rudy, who's a legendary coach in the women's game, was coaching there, and so it all worked out that I ended up going to UCF. But really I didn't know a whole lot about what was happening in women's soccer at that level. I knew UCF was good. I knew that the team had played in what was the version of the women's national championship the year before. So I knew that we were contenders and we were good once I got there.
Yeah, considering you talk about not knowing what was going on with women's soccer at the time, I don't know how much you remember from that and kind of the situation around women's soccer at the time, or even just in retrospect when you look back at what was going on with the sport at the time of recording, like what do you kind of maybe anything recontextualizes of how things were going, because it was brand new, the NCAA taking on the sport when you came.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that question, and obviously I've had many years now to look back and reflect and learn and know that I think there's no evidence that I can provide, but I think I was probably a Title IX baby. That's the only way to really explain it, because women's soccer was added to sports at UCF for whatever reason, I don't know. It was added to other colleges out there, less than 100. Perhaps this was the early impact of Title IX, which was passed in 1972. Nonetheless, I was a benefit of it. I was a kid who needed massive financial aid, so I was a full Pell Grant student at UCF. And I just can't express enough how much I appreciate UCF and the education and the opportunity to play a varsity sport there on scholarship, how much that impacted my life in the most profound, positive way.
So how would you describe UCF women's soccer in the 80s? Like, I know Jim Rudy, I remember when we talked to him, he talked about how you guys would sell out like Bishop Moore High School and Boone High School. Obviously, the soccer and track complex that we know today didn't exist yet. So what was it like with that program at that time?
Well, what it was like for me was I came into a program where I met a lot of my teammates from a very diverse background, coming from many parts of the country, including Michelle Akers, who came when I was a junior. So I just remember the diversity of the geographics, that this university, this program was attracting players from like New York and in the Midwest, and Michelle came from Seattle. And it seemed like a very exciting time. The program was very well regarded at UCF. It felt supported as best as it could be, women's sport at that time. And yeah, the community, we were out in the community a lot, just taking our practices to community. Jim would do like a coaches seminar or something like that to try to help educate coaches and try to expose the women's game to that community in Orlando.
So you talk about Michelle Akers, and that kind of brings me to my next point, because that era of UCF women's soccer had a lot of who's who, not just in program history, but in really United States women's soccer history. So what was it like playing along the likes of people like Michelle Akers, Mary Veras, Jean Veras, Linda Gonzatano, all of them on that same team together in that point?
It was really amazing. I mean, they were players that were so good at the sport. Really, really very unique pioneers. Women who grew up with very little opportunity to play soccer except whatever their talents were providing to them. Many of these players that you mentioned actually had to grow up playing on a boys' team because there wasn't enough girls in their towns to provide a team for them. And so we were a generation of players that were just fighting for the right to play. So there was a certain edge to us, for sure. And all of these players that you mentioned, the Vera sisters, Michelle Gansitano, had, I think, a huge impact on the foundation of the women's national team. And, you know, some of those players that I mentioned didn't actually play for the women's national team, but they played at a high enough level that they were obviously pushing the players that were in front of them. And this DNA of grit and mentality that you see in the women's national team today, I truly believe is tied to like this first generation of players.
So obviously you talk about how, you know, all of those players and a lot of them that didn't make the national team played at a high level. Of course, I didn't even mention the likes of like Laura Dryden and Michelle Sedita, who were all Americans.
Yes.
During the time that you were there at UCF. Who were some of the people, because obviously a lot of people familiar with women's soccer will remember the likes of Michelle and Gansitano and all of that, but who would you say is somebody on that era of UCF women's soccer that you remember standing out very well, but maybe that like the career path didn't work out for them to really get in the limelight as much as some of the other people?
Yeah, well, you mentioned the Vera sisters, Linda Gansitano. I think it's a pretty well-known fact, or at least I hope that it is, that the first women's national team in 1985, there were 3 players selected from UCF, me, Michelle, and Linda. And UCF had the most representation of any college on the very first women's national team. And so I do think a player like Mary was just a phenomenal player that when trying to go to the next level and trying to find a spot on the women's national team would just be barely edged out by her friend Emily Pickering, who played at University of North Carolina and also grew up in Massapequa, and they played soccer together in the same club. So there were just really phenomenal. Kelly Kachiver, who I didn't play with, is a legend at Central Florida. I think she still holds the scoring record. So she came along in that era right after I graduated. But obviously, the reputation of the program was drawing players like her and like other players who continued to meet the same standards that we had brought the program to, and then really excelling in the standards.
So 1982, your freshman year, and this is still, if unlimited, it's still a relatively like timeless experience. You're a true freshman, and you end up getting to the national championship immediately, the very first NCAA women's soccer championship. But what many people may not know about that time was, of course, you came in year 2, so there was a goalkeeper for UCF in year 1, and that was one Amy Ford. And so I remember seeing that right up in an old yearbook about how you and her were really a lockstep with each other, the goalkeeper, during that 1982 season. So what was it like working with Amy during that season, and what proved to be a very historical one for NCAA women's soccer?
Yeah, I remember coming in, and Jim was really an expert at training the goalkeepers. So he would train the women at that time, could also train with the men, which is not allowed anymore nowadays with the NCAA rules. So we had the benefit of having this commingled training session with the guys. But Amy was quite capable, great reputation, really, really good goalkeeper, years of experience already. And Jim, coach basically said to us that there was no clear starter, that we were going to alternate during the season. And then as we got into this thing called the NCAA Women's Soccer Championship, at that point he was going to make a decision about who was going to be playing further and into the tournament. And I got that nod. So, Amy was great competition, just really pushed each other. I believe in competition to help players get to the next level and go to the next level. No complacency.
Of course, that NCAA tournament, the final rounds of those ended up being hosted in Orlando. So what was it? Do you remember at all knowing kind of what was going on, in the sense that this is the first NCAA Women's Soccer Championship, or even just the fact that you were hosting this thing, so you got to play that in this tournament at home?
I don't really think I appreciated then the behind the scenes lift that this took to host this tournament. I'm in college athletics, so I can really appreciate that now. I don't think I knew as a player the consequences of, hey, this is the first NCAA tournament. All I think I knew was we're a good team. We're knocking off teams that are really good too. I think we played Harvard. I think we played UConn. Can't really, maybe it was UMass, but we're winning and we're getting to the final game in order to win the national championship. And then of course we come up against the dynasty already, UNC women's soccer. So definitely appreciated being in that moment, being able to play. My parents came to the game. I remember that. I remember there being a big crowd. I remember it being nice weather. I just remember the day pretty vividly. It was a good game, and it was good atmosphere.
So yeah, that game, I was just going to ask about what you remember about that game. And of course, on the other side of the pitch from you guys was Anson Dorrance and the North Carolina Tar Heels. And you, of course, have been coaching here at NYU since 2015. Anson Dorrance only just recently, a couple of months ago, stepped down from his position as head coach of North Carolina. Given the role that both North Carolina and UCF have play in the world of NCAA women's soccer by being the first two teams in that national championship game, how crazy is it for you you have gone so progressed in your career as much as you have, and Anson has still been around in North Carolina? What was it like playing against him during those days?
Yeah, I was actually quite surprised that he did step down, finally retired. Listen, I think I'm living history, or that's how I Anson, we're all just living history. We happen to be involved in this wonderful game at a time that it was beginning in the country, in college athletics. We've seen it grow massively, and Anson could be credited, Jim could be credited with a lot of the foundation that we saw for the success of with the success of the U.S. women's national team. So yeah, when I think back on it, how lucky I am. I still stay in contact with Anson. I obviously still stay in contact with JR. And I just really appreciate being a part of the growth of the game, being able to look back on it and see the impact that I have made, and also to be really thankful for being around these great coaches. And I was very lucky because I had great coaches. I had Jim, I had Anson. Before he was national team coach, he was the regional team coach. So he was coaching a women's soccer senior league regional team. And then I was still part of the program when Tony DeCicco took over as the national team coach. So I consider myself super lucky that I've had these amazing coaches with amazing track records in terms of developing players and developing people.
Speaking of Jim, like you talk about how he was like a foundational element alongside Anson in making NCAA women's soccer what it is and women's soccer in the United States what it is. What was it like having him as a coach?
Well, I have nothing but like great memories, and it's part of my coaching DNA. What I learned from Jim, and I learned to be organized. I learned to be competitive. I learned to be calm because he's a very calm coach on the sideline. I learned to prepare my players during the week for the game, so I don't have to coach during the game or let the game give it to the players. Let them. Yeah, I have super fond memories of Jim, and I think, or at least I hope that his legacy can be highlighted because he coached. If you just take out players that he had an impact on in the women's national team, me, Michelle, Linda, Amy Allman, who was a goalkeeper, also when I was played on the 91 Women's World Cup team. She was one of the backup goalkeepers. He coached April Cater, who was at UMass, and she was NCAA Player of the Year. He coached Brianna Scurry, who went on to play on the women's national team, as we know, one of the greatest goalkeepers we've ever had. So he has had a major impact on the women's national team and players that have had major impacts in the women's game.
What was it like for a young Kim Wyant to have made it to the NCAA championship right in her freshman year, as you know, you kind of go on through the rest of your career?
Yeah, I was thriving. I mean, I was really thriving in that environment. We were on a competitive stage, so I was really thriving. It's hard for me to think back. It's coming up, I guess, on 40 years or something crazy. But it's a moment that I really just felt like I was in my element, just in this competitive environment.
What are some of your favorite memories that kind of stand out to you? Like maybe something that didn't involve, like, you know, the big moments that maybe everybody remembers.
Well, I think just, playing in the tournament, the ups and downs of that. I saved the penalty kick during the game. It kept us up or down 1-0 until UNC scored again. But I just do remember the atmosphere. We had these stands, they were full, there were people like spilling out who couldn't get a seat in the stands, just standing on the sideline. So I really appreciated like that support and just being able to play in that environment and feel supported, and also have my parents there.
Well, what was it like to kind of see that support for women's soccer, like at that time, to see it like in real time as you were playing it build?
I guess I didn't know it at the time, but I felt, wow, this is great. This is really, really great. And not knowing like what's coming for women's soccer, 25 years down the road with the Women's World Cup in '99 and like massive crowds. And then the '96 Olympics also producing massive crowds. In 1982, I was in my element. I was super happy, not knowing what was going to happen and this just massive growth of women's soccer and the fact that the United States is like a world leader in this sport.
So, of course, you play out the rest of your career. Michelle Akers ends up coming along, getting All-American first team in 1984, early on showing really what she would be doing later on, even after you graduate. But you went out with a bang in 1985, getting your All-American honor. What What do you think was kind of special about that season that kind of led to what it ended up being?
Well, I think the game was growing already in the college environment. I think by then we actually had like divisions. So you had Division I women's soccer, you had Division II, maybe perhaps Division III. But prior to that, my first year in 1982, we were all just together because there wasn't enough schools. So the game was really, really growing. I could see the competitiveness of new teams joining was already there. Playing with Michelle Akers, just watching her, being her teammate, was quite amazing. Being an All-American at that time was like the highest state you could go. I was achieving what I could that was available for women's soccer at that time. And in the summer of 1985, the first national team was created, and because of my experience with UCF, because of my growth with UCF, I was then in a position to get selected for the women's national team for this very first trip to go and play international games. That was all because I was at UCF. That was all because I had this great coach. That was all because I had talent. There's no question about that. But it was all developed in this arena of UCF women's soccer. And now the next step was available for me, the women's national team.
Of course, it was also available for, Linda and Michelle as
Yeah.
well. I mean, Michelle, of course, that 1984 year, I mean, I still look back on it. 1982 might have been the NCAA championship match, but going 10-4 in 1984 to get to the second round, Michelle Akers getting first team All-American at that point in her career. Just what was it like witnessing a young Michelle Akers come on this team and in this 1984 season to kind of get to this big spot in the tournament again and seeing her, do what she does?
Yeah, we had heard this rumor about Michelle. Jim was recruiting her. She was a highly sought after recruit. But to have her land at UCF, along with her teammate Amy, who came from Seattle too, to have them land on campus, you just saw she was just already like so good. Just a really, really phenomenal player already. So her legacy I think needs to be shouted a little bit more in terms of what she did in her career and what she did for the women's national team. But it was quite amazing to be able to play with her. We competed a lot against each other because we like to train outside of what was just our normal practices. So hopefully I challenged her a little bit, helped her get better, and she definitely challenged me to get better as a goalkeeper.
So you've played in high school stadiums. Obviously UCF now has an on-campus stadium with a soccer and track complex. So what has it been like for you, like after graduating from UCF, to witness the program evolve into what it is today?
Well, I just feel so proud to be a part of the UCF women's soccer program and the legacy. I don't know who decided to start women's soccer at UCF, but I'd just like to say like a big thank you, because I think I said before, it's just so hugely impactful in my life to have that opportunity. And to know also that every year when the grades come out for women's sports, the Title IX, to know that every year by the Tucker Institute that the UCF women's sports program always lands in the A category, and how we're doing on Title IX. Also, I think is hugely important. I think it shows the commitment that UCF has and has had to growing women's sports and giving women across the board chances to be involved in athletics.
Well, the program ended up giving a lot of other goalkeepers the chance to go on to do great things for the program. I mean, you're still listed in the record book, by the way, as 9th in program history in career shutouts, and your 1982 season is actually tied for 8th in goals in GAA with 0.6 6-0 in the record book. But in the time since you were in the net, you've seen many a great goalkeeper pass through UCF, and combine that with the men's squad, like the likes of Winston DeBose and all of that. I mean, goalkeeper has become kind of quite a position of prominence in UCF sports in general, really. So I don't know if you follow the likes of the old goalkeepers that came after you, but what's it like to kind of be pretty much the OG of the women's side of the sport, and kind of to see the goalkeeping legacy at UCF evolve since you graduated?
I'm just happy to have my name listed among those players, for sure. The game has evolved, the game has grown, just like everything. There's inflation. Players are better trained, they're trained earlier, they get earlier learning about the sport. So to still be listed in the record books, I'm pretty proud of that.
What was the difference between the Kim Wyant that found UCF versus the one that graduated?
Oh gosh, how much time do we have? I really, to land on campus, to further my education, to be in this competitive environment, to meet the amount of people that I met from such diverse backgrounds across the country. The Kim Wyant that started versus the Kim Wyant that graduated is miles different in the most positive way.
So you mentioned, of course, getting selected for the U.S. Women's national team along with Michelle and Linda, and of course, you ended up getting the nod for the inaugural game versus Italy in 1985. What was it like to kind of go through that process and be able to take that pitch in Europe to do something that that along with the likes of Michelle and Linda that no American women had done on that level before?
When I look back on it, it's just amazing. We were just kids playing soccer. We ended up at the National Sports Festival in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. For me, it was just an opportunity to play more, compete more. We didn't even know that there was going to be a women's national team until it was told to us at the festival. We were just players trying to play soccer. I really don't think that we knew the moment that we were in during the time that we were in it. We were going to Italy, where I was the first time out of the country for me. It didn't really hit me what was happening, I think, and the magnitude of what was happening until we lined up for the first game and we marched out like they march out now. We did it in 1982 in this stadium that was full of people in Jesolo, Italy, and they started to announce the names, and it kind of really hit me then. It's like, wow, this is historic. This is like the very first international game for U.S. soccer, the women's side, and I'm on the field and I'm going to be playing. It was very, very emotional.
Did it help having Michelle and Linda there with you?
Of course, yeah. Michelle was my roommate, actually, in Jesolo. We had this special bond, being together on the team. We felt enormously proud that we came from UCF and we were representing UCF, and no other college had more players than UCF.
What do you remember from that game in Italy?
I can remember almost everything about that first day. I remember going to the stadium. I remember being at the stadium. I remember the grass field being pristine, not like one grass out of place. I remember them playing loud Bruce Springsteen made Born in the USA song for our warm-up. I remember just feeling so good about this environment that I was getting ready to play in. I remember the game. I remember how I got scored on. I remember that we earned a penalty kick late in the game and we missed it. I remember that the Italian crowd, which was large, was chanting "USA, USA, USA," USA. You've heard this story. USA, USA, USA. They're chanting USA, USA, and like we come off at halftime, and you know we're kids with like an edge to us, all of us. And I won't use the language here that we were talking to each other at halftime, but we thought that the crowd was booing us with this chant. We thought they were booing us. But it turns out they weren't. They were very affectionately chanting USA, USA, USA in Italian. They were chanting for us. They were rooting for us. And it goes back to the history that we have with the country and the wars. And so they were very affectionate towards us. And so we decided, that group of players, the OGs, the women's national team, we decided that we were going to take their chant and use it as our chant in the huddle. So I can't remember if this happened at halftime when we went back out on the field, or it happened the next game that we played. But we got in the huddle and we said, okay, what are we going to say? And somebody said, we're going to say USA, USA, USA as our chant. And so we did it. And do you know that to this day, all of the games that have been played throughout all of the years, the chant that every single team does before they go out to play the game is USA, USA, USA. That tradition is still intact from generation to generation to generation. It's a wonderful story.
Honestly, it's kind of I think the big thing that sticks out about that is because of how the prominence of how the USA chant has become. So the fact that the USA USA has stuck around, even though obviously the USA chant is becomes as ubiquitous as it's become, is honestly quite amazing actually. What was it like to kind of see? So what was it like to see that kind of stuff like kind of take shape? I mean, obviously you have the tradition of the USA chant, but obviously, of course, you know, the women's national team marches on after that first game. So what was it like to kind of see the national team start to go through the rest of these firsts of being a national team, and then you get game number 2, or you start touring, you get to host matches in the USA. And what was it like to kind of be a part of that whole process?
I love being a part of it. It was new. It was exciting. You mentioned that we played the very next year, 1986, our first games here in the U.S. up in Minnesota against Canada. I was in goal for that game. We got the first win. I got the first shutout. I'm in the history books for that. No one can ever take that away from me. It was just really a fun time. And for me in particular, because my college career had ended in 1985, there was nothing else for women's soccer to do after that. There was no pro league. There was no women's amateur league. There was no league that I could go and play in. So my only resource for furthering my career was with the women's national team. And even those games were very few and far in between. Nonetheless, we were going to different countries. I got to go to Taiwan. We were, just immersed in this soccer international environment where I didn't know it then, but looking back on it, reflecting now, it was clear that the women's game was starting to grow internationally, and that all of the restrictions on women playing soccer in all of these countries, South America and in Europe, had been lifted, because it was illegal for women to play soccer in Europe up until 1982, which is crazy when you think about it. So the game is now starting to really lay the foundation at the international level. And we were early participants, and we had good coaches, and we had excellent athletes here in the U.S. So we were dominating, almost from the very beginning. So it was just really exciting, and I felt very proud to be a part of that program.
How do you end up looking back on your role? Because you played for, I believe I read 16 matches or something like that, I think was the number I remember reading. But obviously with the national team having been built up over the course, of course, somebody that was part of that legacy afterwards, Sydney Robertson-Hadak, a part of the 99ers, is currently the head coach at UCF. So what was it like being a part of that first bit of the national team, and then seeing that evolve into what it's become?
I can't express how much I appreciate and value being a part of this U.S. Women's National Team. And the team that it has become, the growth that we have seen in women's soccer, all of the issues that the players have stood for, you know, they really stand on our shoulders, like the first team. I think that the U.S. Women's National Team has done a good job of reaching back and making sure that the alumni and the players who were involved, there's only been 280 of us, around 280, are integrated into the program. So when, you know, I have children, my own, Alex and Danielle, and when people hear, oh, you played for the U.S. Women's National Team, you know, nowadays they think automatically like it is today. These women are huge stars now. They're really, you know, big endorsements and huge stars and doing TV commercials and playing games on TV. Well, just by virtue of that connection, they think that that's the way it was for me. When it, you know, it wasn't. There was nobody who barely even knew that we had a women's national team. And so I'll take that though, just the association. Yeah, I played for the women's national. Oh my God, she played for the women's national team. I'm like, yeah, but you don't know how it was back then versus what it is today. But I have nothing but appreciation and happiness for what's happening today in women's soccer across all levels.
So you talk about, you know, how women's soccer being different as it was during that time, but by the time you played your last match with the national team in 1993, pro leagues had been cropping up at that point. Of course, you had your cup of coffee with the Orlando Lions in 1994.
Yep.
But you ended up finding your home for the rest of your playing career with the Long Island Lady Riders. And I just find it really interesting because I also noticed you ended up beginning your coaching career in 1995, the same year your pro playing career started after the U.S. national team. But that was with FAU.
Yeah.
So I remember when I first saw that thinking, like, she's making that commute to play professionally and coach at FAU. And so I just have to ask, obviously you're my Miami native, so what stuck out to you about New York and the Long Island Lady Riders to the point where you would commute back and forth from Boca to Long Island to, you know, both coach and play?
Well, the W League, first of all, the USLW League, which you're talking about, was like a lifeline for my career when it started. 1994 was the pilot season. It wasn't the official season. I played with Orlando, the Lions, which was like a 12-game season. But I actually got recruited to play on the Long Island team because I had like a loose connection here. I was playing on the women's national team, so I had obviously a reputation. The ownership group here on Long Island was massively committed to the women's game, and that was super evident. Women's soccer, FAU, believe it or not, 1995, that was a part-time position. They were investing in women's soccer at the college level, but it was a part-time position. So I could take these summer months and I could come up here to New York and I could get my playing in, and then I could go back and I could coach at FAU. So it kind of worked out really well for me in terms of where my career was. But the W League really provided this great environment for me to play through my prime years as a goalkeeper. And, you know, that league I won 2 championships in as a player. I'm in the USL Hall of Fame there. I just have such great memories of that league and what it did for my career. And it was not quite professional. No one was getting paid. We were all just amateur status players, but believe me, that league at that time had the best players in it for the U.S. And it was definitely the launching pad. It helped create better players in the U.S. Women's National Team cycle. And it was definitely like the launching pad for the very first women's professional league, which was the WUSA, like in 2001 or something.
Well, what was it like to because obviously, you know, you have leagues like the NBA and the NFL, all this stuff that's been around for a very long time. So what was it like to kind of be at that level for women's soccer, because the U.S. national team, obviously, international play is a completely different beast. So, but then you have professionals like, basically the women's soccer equivalent of the NFL or the NBA. What was it like to kind of see that? I mean, talk about having the best players.
It was wonderful. I mean, it was a national league. We were getting on airplanes to go play games. We were playing against good competition. We had literally the best players. We had the best players in that league playing during the summer months. So it was big time. They had USL. They had 2 W League All-Star games down at Lockhart Stadium, which is now where the Miami Beckham's team plays. That stadium hosted the USL W League All-Star game twice. I was in that. It's really just, the history is amazing. I just always found myself in the right place at the right time, and I definitely maximized my talent.
What was it like to be like in the midst of your playing career, but also beginning your coaching career at the same time?
The combination worked really well. It worked really well because I had this credibility because I was playing at a high level. And so I needed to create my life in a way that I could satisfy my need to play, because I really wanted to play all the time, very competitive, and also earn a living, because you have to earn a living. And that combination of coaching and playing really allowed me to kind of make my own schedule.
So you ended up, after 1998, you ended up moving up to the Northeast more full time. Of course, you were still with Long Island, but more in a coaching capacity. Even being a GM, which I thought was interesting. Of course, Dowling College,
yep,
you involved there as well. And I just find it very interesting that even now, you're of course the GM and head coach for Brooklyn City FC. You were right before. You were also the head coach of the York Athletic Club for a while, but during these times, you were doing multiple jobs at a time, even now, of course, with NYU and Brooklyn City FC. So what kind of drives you to still kind of hold these multiple coaching positions at once? I'm sure there are others I probably haven't even mentioned yet.
Well, I love the game. I just really think it's the greatest game in the world. And I love my profession. I always wanted to be challenged myself in getting better. So that's what probably drives me. I'm coaching in the men's game now. This is a full-time job for me here at NYU. I love what I'm doing. The Brooklyn City team gives me an opportunity to stay involved in the women's game, and it's literally just like a summer league team now. But I stay connected to the women's game. I think the club is really wonderful over there at Brooklyn City. So, this kind of gig work that you're talking about, that's how we did it back then. That's like Dowling College. You mentioned Dowling College, which is not even in existence anymore. Well, that was like, hey, we're starting the program over here. It's a part-time job. So I had this full-time work, but I could do this other kind of professional development on the side, and I could stay involved in the game and help grow the game. So it might sound like a lot, but it really wasn't.
So you talk about getting this coach you have now with this building, with NYU, but how did this end up coming about? Because obviously, the trailblazer, they're currently the only woman that is coaching a men's soccer team. You did have Julianne with you when she was at UChicago, but she's at Denver now. But how did this opportunity end up coming around for you back in 2015?
I was at the right place at the right time, but I'm also qualified. And that's the thing, as when I talk to young coaches, your career is not going to happen overnight. It's definitely steps. There's definitely a plan. You have to always be ready. You always have to do professional development. So I was actually on the women's staff here at NYU, and I joined the women's staff because my friend Michelle got her first head coaching job here, and I was at a time and a place where I could join her staff on a part-time basis. So I was at the right place at the right time, because the men's coach here at NYU in 2015 had to resign one game into the season, so they needed a coach. And so that's how it happened. They said, Kim, you're qualified. We'd love to have you take over the men's program. We need you, basically. And so I was at the right place at the right time, and I was qualified. had been thinking about like what my next steps were going to be. My children were getting older, they were spending more time in school, so I was ready for the next step. You know, a lot of people are interested and curious about the fact that I'm a woman coaching a men's team, which is fine. That's I love to talk about that. But the real challenge here for me at NYU was, when I was offered the position, is actually taking over a team that was already in place, that was already assembled and chosen by another coach, like one game into a season. That is really a super, super unique challenge. And that would be a challenge for any coach, whether you're male or female, to take over a program one game into the season. So that to me has always been like the real story, is that this was a chance for me to take on a challenge that I had never been presented with. Like, whoa, take over a team one game into the season. Okay, this is like big problem here. Let's solve it.
Oh yeah.
And you mentioned coaching in this game against UCF when Sitch was coaching. And in my career, of my moments that I've had, being on the first U.S. Women's National Team, playing in the first game, that's up there. That's always going to be up there. But this match, where I was standing on the sideline, coaching against another woman, you know, two women standing on the sideline, leading men, it's up there. It's bumping up to this moment that I have with the national team. Just enormously proud of being able to also have that moment in my career, in my history.
Is there a difference, because you obviously coached a lot of women as well with soccer? Is there a difference between coaching a men's team and a women's team? Your coach Jim Rudy had to do that at UCF back in the day. I guess it comes a little full circle.
You know, a lot of what I'll say is because the genders are different. The game is different. It can be different. Obviously, the men's game can move at a much higher pace. There can be different tactics. But at the end of the day, you're coaching human beings, whether they're female or whether they're male. And just coaching in general is, people don't understand like how hard it is. It's really hard. There's a lot of human hours that go into it. There's a lot more that goes into it than just the X's and the O's. And at the end of the day, players don't really care what your gender is. I really believe that. What they want to know is the coach invested? Does the coach care about me? Does the coach have a game plan? Right? These are things that the players care about. And so whether you're male or female, if you can deliver on those, if you can deliver to the players on those and a lot more, it doesn't matter to them.
How has your coaching style changed from going to a full-time player, a part-time coach, to now to transitioning into the full-time coach?
I mean, I wouldn't say it's changed a whole lot, except that I always try to evolve with the game. You know, the game's changed a lot, and best practices have changed a lot. And now we have a lot of analytics, and now we have a lot of like sports science and GPS tracking systems. So the game has changed a lot, which has required coaches to always stay current with best practices. And people have changed, like kids have changed. We don't coach now like we used to see coaches coaching, you know, like being very like a driven coach, you know, to will the players to do something. So coaching now, I think, has changed in terms of being more collaborative with players. Generations change. You know, I'm of a different generation than the players that I'm coaching. My kids are Gen Z. They think different. You think differently, right? And if I don't know how you think, if I don't know what's important to your generation, then I'm going to fall behind as a coach. So you have to stay current with best practices. You have to stay current with the generational shifts that are happening in society.
So I guess I have to ask because obviously you've now been in New York for a very long time. You have kids. You're raising your family here, and of course NYU is Division III, and Coach Sitch has made her way up to the D1, made her way up to the D1 level. So I guess I want to ask, what is it about New York City that keeps you in this area? Because obviously it's a hustle and bustle of a place, especially even compared to Orlando, which is a relatively major city itself.
I love New York. I think it has a lot to offer. I work here at NYU. Recruiting is, it's not as if I have to tell anyone that I'm recruiting where NYU is or what the university stands for. Kind of takes care of itself. So I'm in a really good spot in terms of having the backing of a program with this enormous reputation and these really, really great resources in order to support me as a coach. And that's very important as a coach. What type of resources do you have that will enable you and help you have success? Resources are huge for coaches. I just, I love it up here. I love the hustle and bustle. I don't do well with just like sitting around doing nothing. So this is really my element. There are enormous challenges here for sure. I don't have a home field. You know, I coach a team that does not have a home field. Sometimes I say, gosh, am I crazy? Right? But we have to overcome that fact, and we can because we have the NYU brand and we attract a lot of good talent to come to this university.
Yeah, I know. I did notice, like when I was like looking up NYU and kind of getting familiar with your team that you have now, that you don't have your own home field. So where do you guys play?
We actually are playing our home field at the NJIT, which is a beautiful facility over here in Newark, but it's in New Jersey. So, you know, you could say fairly that NYU kind of plays always at a neutral site. We either play at a neutral site or we play away. That's our challenge as a program. Does it feel like our home? Of course. You know, we go there, it feels like our home. It's a wonderful facility, but nonetheless, it's not ours.
I mean, hey, playing on the road and in collegiate soccer is always a challenge in and of itself. So, I mean, with NYU, you just throw them in the deep end. You got to do it all the time.
Yes.
So, if anything, that's one of the big things I've learned covering collegiate soccer. What are some of your favorite memories that you've had coaching here at NYU? I know you've been to the NCAA tournament, D3 NCAA tournament a few times,
yeah.
But what's kind of some of your favorite memories that you've had here at this job?
That's a great question because I'm enormously proud that we got to the NCAA tournament 3 times. You know, I took over the program in 2015. I inherited the players. I had 2 recruiting classes, and then by 2018 we got to the tournament. So that was a big success moment for me. We went to the NCAA tournament back to back, 21 and 22. That's hard to do. Like, people don't realize how hard it is to just get to the tournament. But I think I mentioned it before, you know, this game that we had, NYU versus U Chicago, where the head coaches were female, that was a huge moment, big moment, historic moment, something that will go down in history, is down in history. So I would say that's probably the biggest moment.
So as we're taping this on September 19th, your team is 3-1-1, going off to a pretty good start overall of the season. Unfortunately, just had your first loss to Penn State Harrisburg. But how's the season been going for you guys so far from your end, and how it's kind of developed to this point?
Yeah, I think the season has been going marvelously. You know, you could look at the loss and say, oh, who wouldn't take being 3-1-1 at this point in the season? Right, so we're in a good spot, and the thing about results is we, you know, obviously we're looking at the results, but it's more about the process and the performance. And if we just stay focused on the process and performance, we lost on Sunday, right? We gave up a 2-goal lead. Those are things that we need to think about and address. But overall, our performances at this part of the season have been very good. So that's what I just try to stay focused on, is how are we performing? And we're performing to the level that I think we need to be where we are, and I see a lot of upside coming into the season.
So how did your experience at UCF end up influencing you along the way as you kind of like really kind of become, I would argue, this like multifaceted trailblazer in the realm of women's soccer, whether it's the college level, the national team level, the pro level, and now the college level again, just as a coach?
I just want to really try to be clear about this in broadcast. I cannot like state how significant ending up at UCF was in my life. It was just profound, game changing. I'm not so sure, obviously, you know, who knows, but I ended up at UCF. I ended up there on full scholarship based on financial aid and scholarship. So this part of my life, that part of my life, when you're 18 years old, getting in that environment, it just opened up so many doors for me. I was at the right place at the right time. So UCF, huge. Thank you, kudos, everything. I owe a lot of what happened in my career to the fact that UCF started a women's soccer program, to the fact that Jim Rudy was there and he identified my talent, to admissions, whoever was in admissions and looked over my application. I was probably not to the standards, but they said, hey, let's take a chance on this. Let's take a chance on this kid. And so, you know, all of those decisions just had such a profound impact on my life. I went from being you know, I was a poor kid. It was a single mom. We were poor. And so in just my lifetime, I have gone from that economic status to being financially secure. And so how much do I attribute that to UCF? A lot, because I was in this environment where I got an education, where I also got an education just on life and meeting other people. UCF's women's soccer developed my talent to a level that I could get on the first women's national team, right? So all of these steps that I took in my life added to my growth, it added to my credentials, it allowed, these resume builders allowed me to take the next step and the next step and the next step. And it started at UCF.
How does it feel to be able to have, you know, achieved that socioeconomic progress by playing this game you love?
It's amazing, because I really, what, you're gonna pay me for this? Okay, fine. I love what I do. I'm passionate about it. And I tell my kids or whoever, find what you're passionate about and make it your work, because you will love getting up every day and doing your job.
So obviously you're a very busy woman, but have you gotten a chance to come back to Orlando for any UCF games in the recent past?
I have had trouble coming to any UCF women's soccer or men's soccer events because I'm in season at the same time. There's a big alumni event coming up in October. I won't be able to make it. So it is a regret, but I support them from a distance. I'm happy to contribute money when they need money. I track them. How are they doing? I saw Tiff not too long ago. So hopefully the program knows that I'm in their corner and I'm rooting for them.
I mean, hey, whenever you end up getting the time to eventually do that, it's only a 2-hour plane ride away from LaGuardia.
Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's a good one. You've been really
Last
great with
question.
your time.
Yeah.
Yes, and I really appreciate it. I want to wrap up
Yeah.
with this one. Yeah. So what is the difference between the Kim Wyant that graduated UCF versus the Kim Wyant we're looking at right now?
Oh, again, I mean, the growth has been just phenomenal. And yeah, more miles, you know, between when I started to UCF and when I graduated, and now where I graduated and where I am now. I would hope that I could say that I've matured a lot, and I've just grown a lot in every area that you can grow in. I've grown in knowledge, I've grown in empathy, I've grown in appreciation, I've grown in passion, like all of these categories. I've just been able to grow in.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to welcome me into your space for this. I really appreciate it. And thanks so much for sharing all of this with me. You've been great with your time. So
Yes.
I really appreciate it. Best of luck
Thank
with
you.
this season. By the way, I hope you get to another D3 NCAA tournament. And yeah, thank you so much, Coach. We really appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks for giving me a chance to shine the light on UCF.
Of course.